Thank you for joining us, everyone. I have the great pleasure of having Zach Cherian with me here on this episode. Um, Zach has been in the industry for 25 years. He's worked with some of the biggest names in the world, like GE, Agilent, HSBC. He's a certified CPHR, and he's a career coach for executives and HR professionals. He's also written a book, and he doesn't recommend you read it. I'll let I'll let Zach expand on what is his book about.
Hey, so first of all, Sean, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure, and I didn't I didn't think you'd throw me,
Put you on the
in the
spot.
ditch like that right up
Deep
front,
end of
but
the pool.
deep of the pool. Yeah, but my book is really I wrote it I don't know 10 or 15 years back, and it's really for new managers, first-time managers. And the reason I wouldn't recommend anybody buy it is as after you write a book, you look back at it and you say, "Man, that's not good at all, right?" And so, I'd like to do a revision of the book and then recommend it to everybody. But at this point, don't buy it, except if you want to fall asleep and you need a something for a sleeping pill. That's a good book to buy.
That's that's a great idea. So you should come up with an audiobook version of that as well.
That's a good point.
So one of the things that you teach and coach executives on is HR and leadership alignment. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how does HR and the executive leadership make sure they're aligned and what are the advantages of that alignment?
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, before I really talk about alignment, I think I want to just make sure that I recognize the fact that HR is a very critical function.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've been in HR for a long time. I've been a director of human resource for a few companies, few units of a few companies. It's a very, very important role, right? And it's a very tough role as well, as any, senior role is. But if if you think about, for example, there's this very famous executive coach called Ram Charan. He says basically a few people make the culture of the company: the CEO, the HR manager, and let's say the finance manager or the CFO, right? And so maybe literally that's not true. It's not just three people who build the culture of the company, but the role of the HR leader of the company is just extremely, extremely important, right? And so sometimes, many times, I've had the privilege of working with or alongside really influential HR leaders. And sometimes I've also seen really non-influential HR leaders. And one of the things that separates the influential from the non-influential is what are they working on, right? And what are they working on depends a lot on the alignment that HR has with the leadership or the CEO, right? And so I'll give you an example of
Mm-hmm.
how it should not be done. So, for example, succession planning is typically an HR function, right? So, the HR leader is somehow responsible for succession planning in the organization. And the cookie cutter or the bread and butter approach to succession planning is okay, let's pick up the top one layer of the organization or two layers of the organization. How many people do we have in those layers? And do those people have successors? And I don't think that's the right way to do succession planning
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes if you have an executive leave the company, sometimes it's actually better that you do not promote from within. Sometimes it's better to get someone from outside uh, to bring in a fresh perspective. And so, why I give that example is if the human resource leader is not aligned to the long-term strategy of the company, he or she or they will not understand which are the roles that are important, for which roles context is important, and hence how can we develop people from within the system who have the context and develop them, and for which of the roles context is not that important and we need actually a fresh set of eyes. And so can we identify people from the market who will be ready to come into our company? And so succession planning is just an example of how alignment can make an HR manager smarter and hence more influential, right? And so I think it's extremely, extremely important. Obviously, the CEO has a big role to play in making sure that HR is not such, just sort of like a support function, but has a seat on the table, and maybe we can talk about that a little more. Uh, but yeah, I mean, it's extremely
Mm-hmm.
important that HR is aligned. I've also had the privilege of Sean, and I've just had the privilege of working in some good companies with some really good leaders. Uh, and through them, I've had the privilege of also doing a couple of business roles. So I came out of HR and did a couple of business roles. And you really realize that if you have a great HR partner who understands your business and who's working with you for the success of your business, that's so valuable, And you sometimes realize you have HR partners who have no clue of the business and they're not even interested. They are focusing on the wrong things, right? Uh, and and they're not partnering with you for success, and that's a shame. That's a waste of HR's ability to influence change.
100%. You make a really good point about uh, depending on the situation, sometimes it's detrimental to the success of the company to promote from within. Um, I think that many organizations don't advance, they don't succeed, mostly because they're closed to bringing in outside help and hiring from outside for some key roles. They're essentially breathing their own exhaust by promoting from within. Um, there's no new skill being added to the team. In
Yeah, it's funny. I once was applying for a job, and uh, the interviewer asked me, we were talking about succession planning, and the interviewer asked me, so what is the metric of how many critical roles should have successors? Is it 100% critical roles should have successors or 50% of what? I said, listen, there's no real number to it. But again, it depends on the type of role, right? On the criticality of the role. I mean, you and I just, for example, we read a few days back, Starbucks has had a change of leadership, right? There's a new
right,
CEO
yes,
from outside, right? Is that a good move? Well, hopefully for Starbucks it is, right? Now, if we'd stuck with traditional, sort of succession planning thought process, then, you wouldn't get external perspectives ever, right? Not just in Starbucks, but any other company. So it's important to the goal is the success of the company, right? And to get that, we have to make sure that the HR strategy aligns to that. So
100%. Couldn't agree more. Um, I think some HR professionals could be in a pretty tough situation when the CEO has certain personality shortcomings and they their attitude is probably negative towards some of the team members. So would you say that the HR professional in that situation is responsible for influencing the CEO and bringing the CEO back to center because the HR professional is one of the people who shapes um, the company culture along with the CEO and many other key roles?
yeah, I think so. I think the answer is yes. And it's one of those unfortunate things that some good HR professionals sometimes have to work with a CEO or a general manager or a managing
Mm-hmm.
director who is not, HR centric or doesn't understand the value of human resource and long-term people strategy or company culture and so on and so forth. And it's just a hard spot to be in,
Mm-hmm.
but but the right answer, according to me, to your question is it then the HR manager's responsibility? Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that change is the HR manager's responsibility. It can take time and it can be hard, and it requires influence of not just the CEO, but the influence of the people who influence the CEO, right? Uh, but yes, the HR manager in such a situation must become the leader that they're expected to be and work around that situation. It's a hard one, for
Mm-hmm.
sure. It's a hard
Right.
one. I mean, I worked with someone who who honestly did not want to prioritize human capital initiatives, right? And it's not
Mm-hmm.
about HR. Now, he or she had nothing against me or my department or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that, but just not a, just not a sort of a respecter of people development, growth, engagement, etc. All of that was like fuzzy stuff for the person. It was hard, you know.
Right.
Uh, but at some point, I think you have to just tell yourself that's your job, right? And
Right.
and you got to do it. Not so much, but you shouldn't go along with it in the sense, if the person says, well, we're going to stop doing all training and development, um, it's easy to just give in to that and say, okay, since you're saying it, let's stop all of this. No, I think it's you got to do the right thing at that point,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's absolutely possible.
Right. 100%. Um, you mentioned certified trained professionals, people who actually have CPHR um, credential designation. What do you think about companies that bring on HR professionals who are not trained? They don't have any certification, they have no training, and they just come into a company and start working as an HR professional.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's something to be talked about there. Would, for example, people from the business make good HR people? I think they can. I really think they can,
Mm-hmm.
because uh, there's obviously the sort of nuts and bolts of HR. So, for example, employment standards and benefits administration and payroll laws and so on and so forth, right? And so if you're trying to get someone from outside, a non-HR person, and say, okay, now you manage payroll, well, that's going to be tough, right? Because you don't want to get stuck in some technicality which you have no clue about, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, and hopefully there is also the bigger and more strategic part of HR, right? Which is about culture, it's about engagement, it's about business partnering, it's about aligning with the success, the goals of the company. I've seen a few examples where someone from the business, non-tradition, non-HR background has come in and just done a fantastic job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, am I saying that we should follow that recipe all the time? No. But I'm not saying that that cannot work. I think it can work. I've seen it work. Uh, it goes back to, do we have a good understanding of where the company is going and what's required to make the company successful, right? And so, in that sense, Sean, you would have, and I'm sure the listeners on this podcast would have heard about the fact that HR needs to be have business acumen. I think
Mm-hmm.
this is a little bit about that, right? It's a little bit about business acumen, and so people from the business, now, I don't mean to say that everybody from the business has business acumen. There are people in the business who also don't have business acumen, right? So,
Yes.
but if you have business acumen, uh, at least the strategic part of HR you can understand, right? And
Mm-hmm.
of course, the stuff that is not so clear to you or new to you, like like I said, benefits and laws and all, you can pick. As long as you have a good team in HR and you're dealing with the strategic stuff, yes, I
Mm-hmm.
think you can make a difference, right? However,
Right.
HR is while I say that, I also just want to balance it out and say, HR is not easy, right? Especially good HR is not
Mm-hmm.
easy, right? Um, it's something that you learn every day. The more curious you are, the better you get, right? And so, if there's a business leader coming into HR, my only advice would be, don't think just your business skills are enough, right? Keep learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because HR is also like a vast ocean, right? There's stuff to learn.
Correct. Um, Many other disciplines in the world of business are constantly evolving. Technology is constantly evolving. Do you think that HR is also evolving as well? Are we doing HR the same way we did it 50 years ago?
No, HR has changed a lot. I mean, even in my 25 years, it has changed significantly. I mean, I remember my first human resource type role. It was all manual. It was, let's just say, traditional.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was, it was a lot about. okay, this is what the company is, and employees just have to, sort of take it
Mm-hmm.
in, or experience it the way it is. And now what we see, and it's not something that I'm thinking of, it's very public knowledge, common knowledge that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, people have a voice, people have preferences, right? Topics such as diversity, well-being, etc., are now becoming now getting the attention that they should have got a long time back, etc. Specifically on the role of technology, I think technology has become a big part of human resource everywhere. So, for example, in one of my previous roles, we launched the company's first learning experience platform. Now that, an LXP was like, we didn't even know what an LXP was 15 years back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now there's so many of these companies that are um, selling an LXP, which is a fantastic, sort of tool, technology. You have technology in help desk operations, you have technology in recruitment, you have technology in benefits administration, rewards and recognition. Pretty much everything is now technology run.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I do worry about that a little bit though, because uh, sometimes an HR function can uh, sort of make a mistake by going too much into technology. And I'll give you an example. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, ChatGPT and generative AI have become
Yes.
such a big thing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon. But if you look at one of the basic use cases of generative AI in companies in human resources, they take the employee handbook and they create a generative AI version of it. Okay. So now people are going into a software and they're typing their questions, and supposedly generative AI should give them an answer. The problem is people are not getting the answers they need now, because people have some tough questions, right? For example,
Mm-hmm.
I got paid $100 last month. I'm getting paid $101 this month. What is the difference? Now, a programmed employee handbook will not give that answer, right? And so, if you've got an insufficient or a not well made handbook, and you make that into a technological tool and use generative AI, it's still not going to give the answer to the employees. And in the meantime, while HR converted all that to a technology, they took away the team or the people who used to answer these questions. And so what has happened is, slowly you're taking the human out of human resource, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
even the things where people are just concerned, they want to call someone, they want to just talk to someone, they're not getting that. You have to log a ticket, and somebody in HR will look at your ticket after 5 days, and then they'll call you after another, say, 5 days. And that is frustrating, right? If you're trying to engage people to give their hearts into their job, you can't do that. You can't
Mm-hmm.
take technology and make that an excuse for just being far from our
Right.
people. Our people deserve such, let's say, call it service, right? And
100%.
so I love technology. I think that it's got tremendous applications, not just now, but also in the future. But is technology the answer to everything? No, it's not.
Right. I totally agree with not taking the human element out of uh,
Yeah,
dealing with employees and staff and team members. Um, it could be in some cases demoralizing. These are human
absolutely.
beings. They would love to have a human being build a relationship with the HR team. You can't just outsource that to a machine. Um,
Absolutely.
and I think there's a interesting argument to be made that customer service shouldn't be automated, because customers, they want to speak with a human being. They want to
Yeah,
be able to build a relationship, or they want to receive a customized solution to their problem. This reminds me of the early automated system, when you, for example, call your telecom company and says, say sales for sales department, say technical
yeah,
support. You say technical support, okay, connecting you to sales.
yeah,
That also can be pretty frustrating as well. No one wants to deal with that, and I think companies that shift towards having actual human beings at the front line dealing with customers, I think they can be a lot more successful than the companies that treat human beings like a number.
I think especially in terms of technology and human resource, the question is whose charter is it?
Hmm.
Uh, I've seen companies where the HR leader doesn't understand technology enough and is
Hmm.
not clued into the culture enough. But because everybody's talking about generative AI, they want something in HR, right?
It's trendy. It's
It's trendy,
cool.
right? And then you, in the same company, you have the IT head who wants as many IT and generative AI tools in all departments.
Hmm.
So when you employ a technological solution somewhere, let's say in HR, not only the HR manager looks good, the IT manager also looks good, but the client, the employees you just made them go a little farther from you, right?
Right.
And so the metrics look good,
Hmm.
but
I
but you're not measuring the right thing,
I
right?
love that. That reminds me of a digital transformation concept. So, um, digital transformation is a management consulting
Right,
discipline, and it's defined as leveraging technology in order to deliver value to the stakeholders.
right.
So, if the technology that's being implemented doesn't deliver value, that's counterproductive.
Yeah,
And it's counterproductive even in a digital transformation sense. So
that's
I
right.
think value to the stakeholders should be prioritized, not having the most coolest technological devices or software that exist in the
Absolutely.
market. You mentioned you implemented a learning platform. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the learning experience platform that we implemented in a previous company where I worked. Um, so to give a little bit of context, the company was fairly large, multinational, thousands of employees in, I don't know, tens of countries, and we really wanted to make sure that all employees, irrespective of where they are, at what level they are, what kind of role they do, have access to learning, right? And so there are large sites where you can do much more focused and personal things, and then there are small sites where you don't even go, right? And so we wanted to make sure that everybody has access to some form of learning. And so we went out and looked for learning solutions. And the LXP market, or the learning experience platform
Mm-hmm.
market, is evolving pretty rapidly. There's some really good products out there. So what they do is uh, typically a learning experience platform already has content coming in from various places like LinkedIn Learning and so on and so forth. And so when you buy the platform, you buy not only a fantastic UI UX, you also get automatic content. So it's almost like saying, it's like an Amazon of learning. So I could go into an LXP and say, I want to learn a little bit about project management skills, and it will show you based on your preference um, online training on let's say project management techniques, or TED Talks, or articles, or anything like that, right? In fact, you can even say, well, I only have 10 minutes right now to learn something. So it will even filter it by time for you, right? And so you have learning basically at the tip of your fingertips. And let's say, Sean, let's say you're in Malaysia and I'm in the US, right? What you have access to is the same experience that I have access to. And it sort of creates the feeling of this oneness in a global company, right? And so that's something, that's a very good sort of piece of technology. And again, the whole learning space itself is evolving, and I think LXPs are sort of the future.
Sounds great. So, does this mean that if you have a company, you can implement this and help your employees with their professional development?
That's right. Now, so absolutely right. I think I have to add a caveat there that just giving access to content doesn't develop people. It gives a platform for developing people, right? So, for example, I could learn uh, everything that is out there on the net about project management, but unless my manager gives me a project to manage, I'm not going to really do anything, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, at the end of the day, uh, at the end of the day, your development is owned by you, but managers have a lot to do to facilitate that development, right? And so, and so I think if you're a manager listening to this podcast, please know that uh, your involvement in your team's development is crucial. Like, if you are not participating in each and every person's development, their development is much slower than if you were to participate. So, get involved is what I would say, right? Recommend learning to them. Look at what they're learning on their own. Ask them how you can help them. Provide them the avenues, provide them the platform, the projects, or whatever they need. Let them learn, right? I always say that a manager's goal should be that, how, Sean, we update our resume once a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you hope that every year your resume is looking a little better, right? You've done something new, a new project, a new certification. I would say that's the goal of development in a way. If a manager can add at least one line to everybody's resume every year, isn't that fantastic? So, for example, Sean, I worked for you, let's say, for 5 years, and you helped me add five great lines to my resume. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's development, right? That's going to that's
100%.
going to catapult my career. And so be involved,
100%.
So yes, LXPs are great. They can provide the content, but again, it's back to the culture,
Mm-hmm.
the management practices around it
100%.
that'll move the needle.
Fantastic. I think this was an amazing podcast, super informative. Where can people find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, very active because I just started my company, Cornerstone Talent Partners. So, I'm there on LinkedIn. Uh, yeah, I mean, if you send me a message on LinkedIn, I'm pretty quick to respond. So that's one place, and yeah, looking forward to just interacting with great people out
Sounds
there.
good. And yes, Zach is super responsive. We talk all the time, and Zach is pretty quick to get back to you. Um, I'll have the meeting notes and the footnotes down below. Thank you so much, Zach. It was such a pleasure speaking with you. I'll hope to have you on the next episode as well. Take care.
My pleasure, Sean, and thanks for having me. And I hope this was good and look forward to learning from you.
Likewise. Thank you.